Hi, welcome to NDE TV. I'm Peggy Robinson. Today's guest is Bill Guggenheim, and he is the author of Hello from Heaven. And you've been on 2020 and some news programs, haven't you?
I've been doing this for 33 years. So I've been on a lot of TV shows, radio shows, interviewed by magazines and newspapers. Yes. Yes.
And what got
more
you
places,
started? I'm sorry.
more places than I could ever realize.
It's exciting.
At first, yes. After a while, it was repetitive, frankly.
Really?
But the message was important. That was the good part.
Okay. What got you interested in this?
Okay, that's where we begin then. It was in 1976 that Judy, my wife then, called me and said, come on in and watch the Phil Donahue show. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross is his guest. And she's the woman who wrote all the books about death and dying and is world famous for that. And I watched the show for an hour, and she didn't talk about death and dying and grief as I expected. She spoke about near-death experiences. And I was moved by it, but it was an hour show and it was very interesting, and then it was over. However, 2 weeks later, the same show ran again on a cable channel. Only this time it had her name and her mailing address on the screen, and it was there for a while. So because I liked her message very much, I sent her a small donation, sort of like you give to the Boy Scouts or, brownie cookies or whatever they are that they come to your door. Nothing big, and $25, frankly. And much to my surprise, I received from her in the mail a set of audio cassette tapes called Lessons from the Dying Patient and an invitation to attend her 5-day life, death, and transition workshop. I had never heard of that, but they were world famous at that point. They usually had a waiting list of a year, and they were held all over the world. But this one would be just 2 hours from my front door on the other side of Florida, where I live. And at first I was very ecstatic, like, wow, it's here, like a celebrity. That's who she was, inviting me, whoopee. But then I realized I don't have the credentials. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a nurse. I'm not a social worker. I'm not a hospice person. I was none of those things. I'd just be taking up the space of somebody who probably should be there to help, the patients who are dying and whatnot. So I called the last day of registration several months later to explain why, thank you very much, but I can't attend. But she answered the phone herself. I recognized her German-Swiss accent immediately. And she listened to my story, and then she replied very simply in German-Swiss, Bill, I think you should be there. I found myself, this is a dominant woman, I guess, because I found myself saying, if you think so, Elizabeth, I'll be there. A couple of months later, I drove across Florida. They were the 5 most incredibly joyous days of my entire lifetime. Because again, it was not about death and dying. It was about shedding grief and hurt and pain and all kinds of psychological wounds that everyone had. There were 70 of us. And she flew Raymond Moody down from Georgia on Thursday, just so we could talk about near-death experiences. He's Dr. Raymond Moody. Wow. There were only 70 of us, not 7,000, just 70. And so he talked about NDEs. And then another topic came up, which I had never heard of, and nobody else had either. Nobody had a name for it. And that was where it was a nurse whose daughter had been hit and killed while she was walking along the road, and by a driver, not a drunk driver. It was just an accident that really maybe could have been prevented. I don't know the details, but this was a nurse who's had been a bereaved mother for about a year. And she narrated a dream she had. She called it a dream and described it in detail. I won't go through all the storyline, but it really helped her a great deal. And as it does for bereaved parents to hear these stories. And then she went on to say how her son, teenage son, saw his deceased sister while he was doing his homework. He looked up, he saw her standing there and saw her clothing and described her and everything. But that scared him, and he came running out of the bedroom and saying, Kathy's there, Kathy's there, Kathy's there. And, things like this don't happen in the real world, supposedly. And so I thought, let's see, I was very analytical. I had gone to Yale University, and when you do that kind of thing, you become very analytical about everything. That's who you are. And so when she called it a dream, I thought dreams are just nice stories that happen while we're asleep and not real. So I dismissed it. Now, as for the boy, I figured, let's see, marijuana, other drugs, who knows what. He just was stoned on something, and I dismissed that. But then Elizabeth herself narrated a very long story that has been published many times in places about a former patient of hers who had died 10 months earlier. And when Elizabeth was thinking of quitting her research and whatnot, due to the opposition to her work, this woman came and said, may I have a few minutes of your time, Dr. Ross? And they walked down to her office and whatnot. And by the time she finished telling the story, which took about 10 minutes, you could have heard a pin drop on the floor. It would have sounded like a crowbar. We were all stunned. And that was Thursday night. And then Friday, we finished the workshop and I came home. And once I got home again and my little high wore off, I began looking for other accounts like this. If I heard Elizabeth, maybe there are others. I don't know how many, 5, 10, 15, who knows. And I began researching this through the library book system, where you can get a book from any library in the country. And I would find 1 or 2 cases here, maybe 3 or 4 there, 1 chapter in a book, but nobody gave them a name or coordinated the stories. They just said, these are unusual things people have told us. And I was frustrated. It took quite a few years to do this, but nothing came of it. And I thought, I'd like to write a book on this myself, but who am I? I'm not a medical doctor. I'm not a PhD. Who's going to publish my book if I write it? I thought, because those are the people in our society we value the most, as researchers of anything, especially doctors. And so I put it on the back burner, but something that happened in 1980, I'd like to share with you. And that is, I have 3 sons, and our youngest son was not yet 2 years old. And living here in Florida, we had a screened-in pool. And Judy and I had finished our conversation on a Sunday afternoon and sort of left the room together. And then I heard a voice in my head very clearly say, I didn't hear it in words, but I heard it as a thought, go outside and check the swimming pool. Go outside and check the swimming pool. And I did. And when I got there, we had a gate, which was a safety gate because we had a fence all the way around the pool. The gate was ajar because our older boys had used it as a shortcut to the backyard. So I went to close it securely, and I looked down at the pool, and I saw that our youngest son was floating in the middle of the pool in the deep end and not moving. He was not yet 2. He didn't know how to swim. And you can imagine being a parent and having this happen. And so I yelled out Judy's name, and she came running out, and I ran down the side of the pool and dove into it and pushed John to the side. But before I did, I saw that he was in about an inch under the water. His eyes were wide open, and I didn't know if he was dead or alive, frankly. And I just reacted, and as I said, jumped in the pool and pushed him to the side. Judy pulled him out with 1 arm. A few seconds went by, and he spit up some water. But all this had happened so rapidly, he did not even need any CPR. So we were spared from being bereaved parents. And it's because I heard that voice which spoke to me, and I acted upon it. So I say to everybody who's watching this program, if you ever hear a voice, especially while you're driving a car or anything else like that, or a plane, or you name it, stop, slow down, do this, do that, very briefly. Listen to it and obey it. It may save your life and that the life of others, or against serious injury or death.
And that's something I don't think we talk about enough is, you're talking about communication from loved ones, but what about communication from angels, or like you say, the other side, whoever that voice is?
I never frankly knew or learned who the voice is, no. I thought it might be my father, who had died when I was a young boy. He died in 1947 when I was only 8. But 100% say with certainty it was his voice, because it was a thought, and I don't know what his thoughts sounded like.
Right.
It saved his voice. And I say to people always, we have a whole chapter of these in the book, by the way. I'll cover that later, of these experiences. But that voice spoke to me again. That was 1980. Spoke to me in 1988. And one day it said to me, do your own research, write your own book. It's your spiritual work to do. And that was a kick in the fanny, so to speak. I'll begin research. Now, I'd never done research, but it made sense. You find people who've had the experience. We didn't know if we'd find 50 people in a year and how, but we did. And a long story short, we interviewed 500 people, more than 500 people the first year.
How did you find them?
I contacted various bereavement support groups and told them what we're doing. And would you please put a little announcement that we're looking for people who've had an experience like this, which I described. And so many people did that. But they found, we gave our first workshop in 1989, 1 year after we began, when our book was, 1 year after we began our research. And even so long before the book was even written or published, we had exposure to bereaved parents and many, many others. And we had a huge number of people who we found at the conferences, bereaved parents and other places who had had the experiences. And we got things by mail, by telephone, by word of mouth, one person to another. Very often people have had an experience and had the courage to share it, to know other people have had one because they then identify themselves. So long story short, during the 7 years of research that we did from 1988 to 1995, we interviewed 3,000, we interviewed more than 2,000 people and collected more than 3,300 accounts. And frankly, I could have had another 1,000 accounts, but they were already similar to what we had. It didn't make sense to keep collecting the same thing, just slightly different wording over and over. So these are out there, they're very common. They're, for instance, near-death experiences, I estimate maybe 4 to 5% of the public have had a near-death experience. I would say in our book, we say conservatively 20% of the population have had one of these, 20%. And actually one poll was done and there was over 40% of the population. And then for bereaved parents and for the elderly, the numbers are even higher. So this is the most common form of spiritual experience that people have. So that's the story about the background of it. Then I contacted my former wife, Judy. We divorced in 1984. So we'd been divorced 4 years, but she knew the topic more than anybody else I knew, because we talked about it for many years. And we were still friends. We have 3 sons together. We're still friends now, today. And live very close to each other, help each other and whatnot. And she agreed to do the work with me. She came over to my house 5 days a week. And we spent 7 years doing that and interviewing people. We had other people do the interviewing as well as she did by telephone. And little by little, these fell into different categories and those made up different chapters. And it all came together beautifully in time for we received experiences like the week before the book was supposed to be finished, right? Like just like that. And it was a marvelous, magical time. I was going to conferences, giving workshops all along. And these are so healing for people who have lost a loved one by death. In other words, a bereaved parent, a widow or widower, or anybody else who's lost a parent or any loved one. And pets too, loss of pets. There's a lot of healing with these. So based upon our research, we found that there are 12 categories of these types of these experiences that are most common. Since there were a couple more, I'll cover briefly after that. But the most common one we found is sensing or feeling the presence of the one who died. It's a feeling that they're there near you, in the same space, same room with you, nearby. And many people can point to where in the room. There may be a temperature change. That's all there is just a feeling. It's a very comforting one. It's especially prevalent after the death of the loved one. But people, unfortunately, in our culture say, well, of course I'm thinking about my father or my child or whoever it is. I'm just imagining this. No, you're not. We say, if you feel their presence, please sit down, close your eyes, open your mind, and ask for a message. And that's the second category, is hearing a voice. Some people hear a voice like you're hearing mine through your ears and all your listeners. But this is by telepathy, thought, mind-to-mind transfer. And people know it and they recognize it and they know who it is and what's being said very clearly. Some people have two-way communication and whatnot. By the way, all the things I'm going to describe can occur individually or together. You can have this, this, and this. There's no set formula. It can be like a stew, just any ingredients.
You mean a group of people can see the same spirit at once sometimes?
That's true. That does occur too, but what I mean is that you can feel their presence, hear their voice, and see them at the same time.
Oh, gotcha.
So, in other words, of these 10 types of experiences, you can have any combination.
Okay.
I have to describe them individually, but they can occur simultaneously. The next one is feeling a touch, which is a pat, a tap, a caress, a brush of the hair, a kiss, even a one or two armed hug. But those are between two people who were used to touching each other or being touched by each other. And they reckon, because if it was somebody more distant, you wouldn't recognize it. But these are very intimate experiences which express affection, nurturing, and love. All these are based upon love in our estimation. Now, this is a very interesting category. Smelling a fragrance. You smell a fragrance, an aroma, a scent. And it could be flowers, perfume, incense, cologne, even cigarettes, tobaccos, bath powders, anything, or even a mother recognizes the scent of her baby. Okay, it's unique. And what's interesting here is often it's not just the one person who smells it, but other people who are there as well. As an example, I like to give, a woman could be in an office in North Dakota in the middle of winter, sitting in a cubicle at work, and she can start smelling lilacs. There aren't any anywhere, not perfume, not candles, not real flowers. And somebody walks down the corridor and goes, sniff, sniff, I'm smelling lilacs. And another person could come. Independently, they report to each other. And we have an experience with as many as 12 people smelling roses. And what was reverse way, the only one who didn't smell the roses was a woman who had never met the little girl who had died. Mm. These people had all gone to the funeral. They went back to the mother's home, and that's where they smelled the roses, except for this one person who did not. The visual experiences are a huge category and kind of hard to put into words, but you can read them in the book, Hello from Heaven. You may have a partial vision or a full vision of them. And partial means that they appear to you as just as an outline, or just where they're translucent or transparent or something less than fully solid. And or you just see them from that down to the neck and shoulders, or down to the waist, down to the legs. And a full visual is just the opposite, where you see all of their body and it appears totally solid at that time, just as much as we are to each other. And what's very beautiful is, regardless of their form of death, and I don't want to be gruesome here, but there are things that happen to a physical body in a car accident, a fire, a war, or whatever. And but when these people come back, in all cases except one I can think of, they came back healed and whole and in radiant health, usually smiling, sometimes saying, I love you. There may be communication, in other words. But they're communicating, I came back to show you, you don't have to worry about me. And the one that even, you see, by indirection, you learn too, because this one woman saw a man with his head bandaged. It was her brother, who she had not seen in many years. But she knew that he had become a police officer, a motorcycle police officer over in another city, not far away. But they just had been estranged. But when she went over to find out more about him and whatnot, this is well after the funeral and all that, she found out he was a police officer on a motorcycle who had been in an accident and his head was badly damaged. And that's what that was evidential he was showing her it was the head and not some other part of his body. So things like that are clues that they provide. All these are filled with clues.
And I like that your research, you don't use these experiences that been through a medium or psychic or something. These are spontaneous.
All these are direct experiences. None of our work includes psychics or mediums. I'm sorry I didn't say that earlier. I never gave the definition of an ADC. That's what I missed. An ADC is what we're describing, after death communication. Is a spiritual experience that occurs when a person is contacted directly and spontaneously by a loved one who has died. Directly means that there's no third party involved, no medium, psychic, healer, whatever, no.
Somebody saw a ghost.
So no, they have to know who it is. That this is not, I saw a ghost or I saw a dark shadow. This is where they know who it is. We're very tight with our definition because we wanted something that's believable. There's plenty of other shows, paranormal shows, you can watch on TV. I call it the flashlight under the chin. They walk around the basement with some big box that goes beep, beep, beep. They say there's psychic activity. We're a poltergeist here. No, this is not that. This is real living people who have died, loved ones, relatives and friends who have died, who you know, and only that. So there's no third party. And it's a spontaneous event because our deceased loved one chooses when, where, and how to contact us, which can be anywhere. It can be indoors, outdoors, in a car, believe it or not, on an airplane. We have accounts. Otherwise, the book, Hello from Heaven, contains 353 firsthand accounts.
Have you noticed? I'm sorry, go ahead.
And I just let me finish this up. And so they could happen anytime and anywhere, and they do. I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No, that's okay. No, go ahead.
No, go.
Have you noticed that these often occur around a window or a mirror?
It doesn't sound familiar, no.
Okay.
I'm not saying some haven't, but it doesn't sound familiar to me one way or the other.
Okay.
They occur in so many different places at times and everything else.
For me personally, I've just noticed that it's often around a windshield in a car, a mirror in the bathroom. There's some reflective glass around. I don't know what that would have to do with anything, but.
And maybe your ability to perceive it in that situation. Verbal, when you see them, they may communicate with you verbally or not. Again, these can happen together. ADC visions. These are hard to describe. It's like seeing a 35mm slide, which your younger viewers won't know what that is, but it's a picture, some in black and white, some in color, just suspended in space. And we've concluded that actually you're seeing them in their dimension, the afterlife, heaven, whatever you want to call it. You're looking through from here to physical earth to there. And these read, the rest of it reads just like seeing a person in the same room. And these especially occur while you're meditating or in deep prayer. And you're seeing into the spirit realm, so to speak. The Twilight experience, we didn't even know we had these until we went through them and we found that people were using the same language. Just as I was falling asleep, just as I was waking up, I saw my whoever it is. And then often if they wake up, open their eyes, that person's right there, right with it. Same room next to their bed, wherever it is they happen to be. So those are we call Twilight experiences. ADC experiences while asleep. Sleep state ADCs or ADC dreams or visitation dreams. They have different names. Same thing. They're much more vivid, intense, colorful, and real than ordinary dreams. They have a beginning, a middle, and an ending, whereas ordinary dreams are fragmented and sort of jumbled and filled with symbols. And it's hard to remember them unless you write them down somehow immediately. But these are visitation, where they're visiting you while you're asleep. And in our culture, That occurs a lot because most of us are too busy all the time to have these experiences because we just aren't relaxed often enough. We're gone to go until we conk out at night called sleep, and that's it. So they can contact us the easiest for them when we're relaxed, open, and receptive. We're in the alpha state. A category I like especially, you've heard of out-of-body experiences. In some cases, I feel the person we interviewed went out of their body and contacted their loved one who's somewhere nearby, meaning the same room, same house, somewhere a few hundred feet away, somewhere thousands of miles away, and a few were all in the spirit realm. And those are especially, for instance, like one mother whose baby had died, she didn't have any relatives, or her husband didn't have any relatives who had died recently, or any recent time. Who would take care of my baby? Well, she went to the other side and saw the people taking care of her baby. And that gave her immense peace.
Yeah,
And comfort. So that's what I like to say out of this is the way I was raised as a Episcopalian, Catholic, whatever, is that when I was taught that when we die, some part of us called a spirit or a soul leaves our body. And if we're good, we go up to heaven. And if we're bad, we go someplace else. Okay, et cetera, et cetera. But I say it a little differently. What I've come to believe is that each of us is a spirit or a soul right now. We are wearing a physical body. This is our earth suit. You have yours, I have mine. We need this to operate at this level of reality. Without it, I couldn't pick my cell phone up, or I couldn't talk to you. Nobody would see me. I mean, I would be a ghost, yes. But this is our physical body. But the only thing that, quote, dies is the body. It breaks down along with the brain, which I call our onboard computer, which operates the body. But the spirit or soul we are with our mind, which is eternal, continues going to the afterlife, the afterworld.
Yeah, and I hear so many discussing, is there a soul, is there not a soul? And I just think it's so simple because when someone dies, you say they're gone. The body's right there, but they're gone. They're gone. I mean, it's a knowing that everybody has, even, before you even check the vitals.
Yes.
You know clearly this person is no longer here, even though the body's right there. The body hasn't disintegrated yet, No. But you just know.
We collected some experiences because we also contacted various hospice people. And sometimes they're working with a person before they die, and they know instantly when the person has died. And if they're right there, some of them are able to see a small, it's like a puff of smoke leaving the middle of the chest or the top of the head. And it goes up above the body, above the scene, and forms into the likeness of the person whose body is laying below. And they're up there, they may thank the hospice person or nurse or counselor or friend, whoever it is, and then sort of like Superman, up through the roof or out through the window. We call that soul leaving the body. That's not in the book, but we have those. We have other things like that, confirming that there is a soul or spirit.
I was only 18 years old, and my first job was working at a nursing home. And one night, an old man died, and I was told to go in and give him a bath before the funeral home come to get him. And all of a sudden, I just felt, saw, one of those slash, and he come right out of his body, and he went out the bedroom door. And I seen it going straight to the exit sign through the hall. And I ran down and opened those doors, which we're not allowed to do. And I opened them up, and I was yelling for the head nurse, Stella. I was like, Stella, Mr. Smith wants out. And I wasn't going to make him wait. I just opened those doors so he could go. I suppose he could have went through them, but 18 years old, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, he's such a hurry to get out of here. I mean, he had been crippled up in this bed. It's for so long.
Yes.
yeah, it's only 18. And it was just like, and they said, Peggy, we'll take care of it from now on. I think they were thinking like, she must be too young to handle this.
Yeah.
But I mean, I felt it. I never forgot it.
But you know, do you realize what this says about you as who you are? At 18 years old, you would be willing to work with terminally ill people and be
I
with
do
them
now. Of course, I didn't
feel
then.
and feel comfortable with them enough. So even when the moment they die, you're not freaking out or something like that.
Yeah, when I've been with mother-in-laws that have passed, I've had direct experiences with them. So
Okay. Telephone calls. Well, we don't have the old phones much anymore, but with phone calls, used to be the phone would ring while they're asleep. Well, you can understand fantasizing having the phone ring while you're asleep during a so-called dream. But what about when you're wide awake, standing in your kitchen or living room, whatever you're doing? The phone rings, you pick it up, you hear the voice of your deceased loved one, and it's a one-way or even two-way conversation. Gradually, their voice fades away. And when the call is over, there's never a hang up or a dial tone. It's just as though the line was cut, severed. It's gone. And again, that's a more before cell phones, but that's another category I'll get to in a minute. Physical ADCs of physical phenomena are a wide range. These include lights blinking, lights or lamps blinking on and off, radios playing a song that you associate with the one who died, TV, again, with a particular show that you relate to the one who died, toys, mechanical objects beginning to move even though the batteries may be dead in them. And it's all kinds of things being moved, photographs, pictures, various other items being moved or turned over in your home. It's a long list of, I call it things that go bump in the night. It's incredibly long. And people recognize, if they're sharp, they recognize what it is and who did it and why, because it's filled with symbolism that pertains to their relationship. It's not just random stuff. Symbolic ADCs is a huge category. Quite a few books have been written about that now. This is, people say, well, how do you have one of these experiences? And my answer has been, ask a higher power, the universe, your deceased loved one, whoever or whatever you believe in, to provide you with something, a sign of some kind. It may take a while to arrive, and they may be very subtle, you could miss them, but most common ones include butterflies and rainbows. When I say a butterfly, I don't mean just see a butterfly. I mean like one woman walked out in the backyard, there's a huge swarm of species she had never even seen before. Or you're walking out and maybe in a park or someplace, and a butterfly just stays right ahead of you as though it's guiding you somewhere, and it will take you to a particular destination. Maybe you find to a bench where you sit, and it's particularly beautiful setting to sit there. So it can be that kind of thing. These also involve many, I think now I've heard about 25 different species of birds. And it's not just, again, seeing the bird, but the bird comes, in some cases, lands on your finger or sits near you, perches near you for many minutes. And most birds don't do that. They may come, grab some food, look around, chirp, and take off. But this is all different species for many minutes that go on. And flowers that bloom out of season, that kind of thing. And then finding, who knows what, coins are the most common, pennies, dimes, feathers, pictures, things that you mentioned before, ladybug, things to do with ladybugs, whatever you're, in that case, say a child who's into ladybugs, they have stickers and they have shirts or a lot of different things to do with ladybugs. And you know it when it occurs. And this is just a little hello, hi, I'm thinking about you, I love you. They don't last long, but they're very uplifting. And many people have many of these. One couple found so many dimes, and she kept a book, a ledger of every one that had been found. And at that point, it was over 400. Okay. And then she was still counting. So this is very, very comforting to have these. According to our research, the purpose of all these signs and other things like that is to provide comfort, reassurance, and hope to their parents, their spouse, siblings, children, grandchildren, and others, that they still exist. See, there are two parts to grief. One is our concern about one who died. Deceased or deceased still exist? Are they okay? What about them? I don't know anything. And the other part of grief is our sense of loss, of course, our bereavement, our sadness, our depression or despair, whatever. And they're at least feeling part of that, letting us know we don't have to be worried about them. And then verbally or non-verbally, the most typical messages are that they'll be there to meet us and greet us when we make our own transition. And their messages are, I'm okay, I'm fine, everything is okay, I'm happy, don't worry about me, don't grieve for me. They're much better off, frankly, than we are. I know that sounds crazy from the normal perspective, but they're in a much better place than we are. We've got a lot to go through still in our lifetime, ups and downs. Okay, everything will be all right. Go on with your life. You're sort of like a guardian angel at that point. They'll say, thank you. I'll always be there for you. I'm watching over you. That's a guardian angel kind of thing. I'll see you again. And but whether they say it or just express it in some other form, just by becoming to you, it's I love you. I love you. All these experiences are based upon love. They're not there to frighten us, to scare us, to warn us. It's love. And many times they say goodbye, which may be that they won't visit again. Many people have not just one of these experiences, but a chain of them, several of them. And it could be 2, 3, or 4. One woman who used to work with her husband and their joint business, when he died, she didn't know how to do what he had been doing. He contacted her every day and guided her on what to do next to keep the business going. So, I mean, there's no limitations on these if you're open to it. And so people do have multiple experiences.
My husband's grandfather appeared to his grandmother after he had died and told her to go to nursing school. And she did. She became a nurse.
Yeah. A lot of people are told to do something like that. They're given guidance, and some heed it and actually do it. Some choose not to. Okay, their choice. Now, these are not all new or brand new or something. In the psychological community, the psychologists, psychiatrists, they're called grief-induced hallucinations, meaning not real. That's the way they've been regarded up until we did our research for Hello from Heaven. And they were, just like with near-death experiences, the early ones, if they came back and were in their room or something, tried to share it, they wound up in the psychiatric section of the hospital.
Okay.
Of NDEs. And they learned to shut up for a while until they got out. Same thing with these. If they shared it with a therapist, maybe, he'd be taking notes and prescribe all kinds of things, including drug treatment for it to stop it from happening.
Yeah, a lot of people did keep quiet, even like grandparents, you'd have to ask them directly if they had any kind of experience, and then they would tell it. And you'd never know they did because they weren't allowed to talk about it because it wasn't considered Christian. Yes.
Oh, there's a big, when we were doing our research, we had Bibles sent to us, Christian tracts, all kinds of warnings about the devil and everything. But once the book came out, we have not received even one. I can't account for it, but it's judgment about other people's experiences. Now, what's really interesting to me is we have 6 chapters of why are these real and not grief-induced hallucinations. The first one is ADCs, after-death communications, before the news. In other words, you have the experience before you're informed that somebody has died. As an example, I live in Florida. And let's say I have an experience tonight with somebody who lives in California. They might have been in an automobile accident, but I didn't know that. They came to say goodbye to me. Only tomorrow might I receive an email from somebody or eventually a letter or a phone call or something informing me they had died. So I'm not bereaved. I'm not grief-stricken until I know somebody's died, right? I'm not sitting there crying for them, whatever.
I had one of those. I was working outside. I was hot and sweaty. I was busy. And all of a sudden it was like, what are those big birds? Like you see a cloud like flash. that got my attention. Like, what's this darkness? And I look up and it come down and it just stopped. And it was one of those, like, say, see, feel things. Like, you don't really see it, you just know something's there. And they said, like, telepathically, like in a real fast hurry. And I knew there was two of them, it was female. Said, are you still praying for Pappy? Well, that was my ex-father-in-law. And I'm thinking, I'm divorcing his son. No. I mean, I used to when he had heart trouble and I was there for him. I think, no, it's my ex-father-in-law. I don't like go around him anymore. And they kind of like talk between themselves. And then he took off. And I'm like, wait a minute, should I be praying for him? Like, is something going on? And later I got a call from my son and said, Pappy died of a heart attack.
See, you didn't know.
I could have known that,
You
that
didn't
he
know
was going to
anything.
die.
You had the experience first and validation of it later.
Yeah.
That's my point. Another one is when people are grieving the death of a loved one, with the exception of bereaved parents, most people handle it pretty well after it's 3, 4, 5 years. Bereaved parents may extend that. But we have experiences of people who've had an ADC with someone who died 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, the longest after 33 years after she died. And that was a woman who lives rather near me. And our deceased, I think her husband, told her to get out of the bedroom where she was at the moment. And he said it was such vehemence, she did. And just moments later, a huge tree, I think an elm tree, crashed through the roof and would have fallen on her on the bed where she had been. He protected her life. So evidential ADCs, it's because people learn something they didn't know before. In some cases, it's something they knew that there was something of value. And I say value, I don't mean monetary value. It could be photographs. It could be, a piece of clothing, something that you're looking for, and they come to tell you where it is. You've been looking high and low and everywhere, and couldn't find it. No,
I heard that one time about a will. A spirit come back and told where the will was.
Yes, and then there's another one where you didn't about something you didn't even know existed. You mentioned the will. An older woman was told by her husband to go upstairs to their bedroom, to the dresser, the old-fashioned kind with many vertical drawers. And at the top, it has just small little drawers. Pull out the one on the right and put her hand under the paper. People used to put paper in drawers, something like that. And she did. And she found an insurance policy. She didn't even know we had it.
Huh.
Okay. It didn't. It wasn't like winning the lottery, but it was money that came in handy at that time.
Yeah.
And so there are many things. It could be a $20 bill. This goes back quite a few years when $20 bill bought something, something that was in an old trunk in the garage or whatever that they're led to find. So this is a very wide type of ADC. ADCs for protection. Again, we touched upon it earlier when my son was almost drowning, or was drowning. Unfortunately, I did speak to some parents who had been advised to go outside and check their child, but they didn't. And that child drowned or whatever happened. Fortunately, not too many. That's why I urge people, if they hear a voice or have an experience.
That's right. Check it out.
Check it out. The most you've done is wasted a few minutes of your time.
Right. Exactly.
May have saved a life and your own sanity and grief. So, but ADCs for protection, people have been told to stop a car or don't get on an airplane. But they're always indirect. Like I was told, go outside and check the pool. They don't come and say, your son is drowning. You say, check the pool. In this case, look out your window and see the barn. And she did, and she saw the barn was on fire. This was on a farm. And all other kinds of things like that, especially with automobiles, don't go down that road or make a detour or this or that or the other thing. And it works out beautifully. That's why we
and really, if you take away the taboo of ghosts and those kind of, these people are crazy, and you stop and think about it, when you're on the other side, of course, you're going to be watching out for your family. Of course, if you're about to get hit by a car or, burn up in a house, you're going to certainly try to be doing everything you can to prevent that. You're going to be their guardian angel. You're going to be watching over them. And it's up to us to listen.
Yes, exactly. We have a chapter on suicide intervention. These were all people who were thinking about or planning to take their own life and to end their life. In 2 cases, they were in the act of committing suicide. And a deceased loved one came to them. It wasn't what they said. They didn't have magical words. Some didn't say anything, but just somebody showing up at that very moment dissuaded them, convinced them not to continue. And obviously we were able to interview all these people 5 or 10 years later, usually.
And you know
So
what I find interesting is that I have guests that come on and call it, spiritually transformative experience. And they're not saying this was a grandfather or whoever. They're just saying it was Jesus, it was God, it was a guardian angel, it was, and it was something that saved me during maybe a suicidal moment or something, that they were crying out to God and they were saved. And an exact same thing happens as what you're talking about as a relative, where they come in to rescue.
very often I imagine that they're sent back. Somebody's asking for that. And they're told, you don't go do this. We have guardian angels, all the rest of it, deceased loved ones who act as guardian angels, etc. ADCs with a witness, and we started this earlier. In some cases, 2 people together at the same place, the same time, share an experience. We call these shared ADCs. You might see the person, and I might hear his or her voice and receive a message, or any other combination. But we could share the same thing. We could both see, but more likely, it's one does this, one does that. And it's only because one begins talking about it, the other says, well, I didn't want to say anything, but as long as you mentioned it, let me tell you what I experienced. And from what I've read, a lot of people who've died come back to attend their own funerals, and they're sometimes seen. And although we don't have a chapter in the book, it was too long already, but we have a whole chapter of children's experiences, being under 18, all the way down to 3. There are 2 or 3 different categories, but in some cases, children are far more able to discern a deceased loved one than adults are. And they may see somebody at the funeral, but they've learned, shut up, don't talk about this. You'll be told you're nuts, or I don't want to hear about it, or slapped, or some cases.
My sister-in-law, Barb, at her funeral, I was kind of like praying to her, telling her I'm sorry, because we had an argument not long before she passed. And we had always got along good. And we had this one argument. I got onto her for something. And so I'm sitting there like praying, like telling her I'm sorry, I feel really bad. And then I see her just floating between, I'm on the left side, and here she's going up through the middle. And she stops and just briefly and smiles at me and just keeps going on. Like I could see in her face, I could care less. Like, any argument, you could tell she was such bliss. And then I seen her go up and stand behind her 3 kids. And I saw her bend over and whisper something in her son's ear. But before she got there, once I seen her smile and go on, and I seen everything was okay, I felt lighthearted then, and I chuckled, and I teased her. And I said, hey, Barb, I said, I don't like the songs your kids are singing. I said, because they had been up in front of everybody singing before this, and they had sat down. I said, could you have them sing Amazing Grace or something? Because I don't like these songs. And I giggled. Like, that's kind of our relationship. We were just kind of blunt with each other and always laughing. And so I said that, and then I seen her lean over and whisper something in her son's ear. And then I seen him get up, and I seen him say something to his sisters. And he said, we weren't planning this, but Mom just told me to do this. And I'm like, if it's Amazing Grace, I'm going to fall off my chair, is what I'm thinking. And of course, it was Amazing Grace. And I didn't tell him for a couple of years because the kids were so devastated by her death. She was young. They were just above teenage years. They were so close. And I was afraid that it would make him suicidal. And I want to go back to his mom. I mean, they were really tore up. So I waited a few years, and he had called here for some reason, talked to one of our kids. And I said, Jesse, I want to tell you something. And I told him. And he says, oh, I know you're telling me the truth. He says, because that's exactly what Mom did. Mom told me in my ear to sing Amazing Grace. And he said, I know you're telling me the truth. And I'm like, how much more validation do I need to know these things are real? And he died not that long after that of a drug overdose. And so, of course, I'm like, I hope it wasn't what I told him. I hope it wasn't, suicide to go back with mom. I hope I didn't push that along because, it's like it's a decision where they tell people these things of what they're going to do with it.
I don't think many people die by suicide because they're in a positive frame of mind, looking forward to the hereafter, to heaven or whatever. I'm reading the accounts of near-death experiences, say, I want that for me. I don't think many people do it. The drug overdoses, many of those I think are accidental. It takes more than they realized.
Yeah, it was heroin.
And the heroin, opioids, and all the rest. They don't know what they do. Here's a pill, take it. It's like Alice in Wonderland. One makes you bigger, one makes you smaller.
Yeah, it was said too that somebody gave it to him too.
Yeah,
that he wouldn't normally took. So, but yeah.
Anyway, all these after-death communication experiences provide comfort, hope, and healing, especially for people who are grieving or are afraid of death. Our book, I'm not just trying to sell a book, it's only $7.99 at Amazon anyway, but our book has helped many people have a fear of death, which is part of our culture.
And it's been a bestseller. It's in several languages and things, right?
That's about 18 foreign languages, and it's been out 25 years. And it's still helping people, yes. And I especially like to help bereaved parents more than anybody because their grief is the most intense. I'm a father, I have 5 children, and one of them did die by suicide. But I've seen her myself and whatnot. And it's okay. She was literally in a better place than she was on Earth. She went through a lot of hell while she was here.
A coworker of ours committed suicide. We just seen him, talked to him at quitting time. But that morning, when at our meeting outside, I nudged my husband. We worked together, and I said, "Somebody's going to die. Somebody that's here right now is not going to be here tomorrow. Somebody's going to die today." And I saw 2 guys, and I said, one of those 2 right there. And it was one of them. The next day, he didn't show up for work. And then late morning, they told us he had committed suicide. And I told my husband, I said, take me back to the field where he stood laughing, talking to me the morning before this. And I said, I just want to go there for some reason. I just want to feel him happy. And the other guys was off walking, talking to themselves, trying to find out details what happened. I stood there alone, and I was talking to him in my mind, like, why did you do this? He's only 23 years old. He's such a sweet kid. And all of a sudden I saw him, and he was like hovering above me, and he was smiling, and he went, I messed up. And I'll never forget that. Just that smile, I messed up. That carefree.
Yeah. A few more points here that most ADCs reduce the intensity of the experiencer's grief. In other words, they're healed to a degree, and it shortens the duration of their bereavement to have these experiences.
Yeah.
So they're 2 very big positives. However, some people react with fear when they have an ADC. They sometimes surprised by the suddenness of it, or because they've never heard of one of these happening to anybody. They think they're crazy or losing their mind, things like that. And other times it conflicts with what they've been taught in their church or other places of worship. In other words, where their philosophical or religious beliefs. And we say we encourage you to trust your own experiences and accept them as being real for you, at least for yourself.
Yeah, it's not the devil.
It's not the devil. No. We believe that ADC should be regarded as a natural and normal part of life, and that they deserve the same public awareness that near-death experiences have been receiving since Raymond Moody wrote his first book in 1975. I was one of the early members of IANS in 1981, so I'm very familiar with NDEs. And those are very powerful because they're longer and they describe a lot in some cases. These are shorter. People can usually have more than one of these oftentimes. And so that's like a story. This is like a telegram. These are generally a minute or less. Some go on to seeing a bird or something, but
Do you think these kind of run in families, like maybe some families are more of a seer, they call
Definitely,
it?
definitely. Yes. Some families are much more open to all of these things. It was often, if one person had an experience that we interviewed them for, they had other family members who had also had experiences with the same person or other people. And it's because they're open and they've talked about it. They accepted each other. You don't go like, you're cuckoo or you're nuts or the devil's going to get you or that's not, in the Bible, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, that's a big part of it. And this is the first book that's ever been written about this topic. And I'm not saying this to brag, I'm just saying it. Raymond Moody's called the father of NDE research. I've been called the father of ADC research. So
Well, that's nice.
Yeah, and
I would brag.
I'm just saying.
Go ahead, do it.
I'm happy with this book because
Yeah.
I know it helps people, and give it to other people who are bereaved if it doesn't apply to you.
And your story too is how you got into this. And, it was just like the universe knew you were meant to do this, even though you didn't.
I read another book called Stories from Heaven, which starts really in 1974 when I was 35. And I did not believe in life after death whatsoever. I used to compare people to flashlight batteries, that when the juice ran out, you threw the battery away. What's done is done. It's over, finished, done, no more. And then I had a series of experiences starting in 1974 after we moved to Florida from New Jersey. And they'll all be in this book. And I believe that I've been pushed and pulled and prepared to write Love from Heaven. And that's my spiritual work to do in this lifetime. That's that's one of the reasons I'm here. There are many other reasons, but for the public, this is my main reason. It wasn't just to be a stockbroker in Wall Street, things like that. And we believe that after-death communication experiences provide convincing modern-day evidence for life after death. They confirm that when our body dies, we simply make a transition from this physical world to a continuing existence in the spiritual realm. There we can expect to have loving sessions and reunions with all our deceased loved ones and friends and pets as well. We have accounts that involve pets where their dog or cat came back to them. It's not in the book, but we have them in our files. And they can and do communicate with us. And that the big message of the overall message of all this is that life and love are eternal. That's one of the summation of everything we've done.
And I know, from my husband had a recent diagnosis, and then thank God we found out it was a misdiagnosis later. But, with your daughter, even though you know this stuff and you study it and you believe it, when things happen, you're no different than anybody else.
Oh, no. When a loved one died,
all that.
my mother died in 2004. My father died when I was a little boy. And although in his case, my father had congenital heart disease, and he was in a great deal of pain constantly. The drugs they had back in the 1940s didn't do anything. And so I used to hear his very agonized voice. I'd hear him calling out at night. He just couldn't sleep. He was in so much pain, and nothing they gave him or could do for him helped him. So, and he'd been in and out of the hospital for 2 years, and that didn't work. He didn't have the surgeries. Today would be no big deal, but again, 1947. And so when he left his body, I felt a sense of relief for him. I missed him. I'm an only child. So for my father to die was a huge void and was never filled. I had a stepfather, but that didn't do the same thing at all.
No,
No,
usually not.
definitely not. But I feel he helped me with this work, by the way. I can't be specific, but in a lot of small ways. And that
I had a guest here recently, Brian Hoyland, whose health is still bad. And he has talked to his kids that, he probably will pass. And he's had an NDE, and his boy come to him and told him that he hoped he did. that because same reason as your dad, that to be out of his pain and suffering and knows he'll be in a better place. I thought that's love right there.
I mean, I didn't say that to him or anything. I didn't
Right.
have that beforehand. I miss my daddy.
Yeah. And, that's why I do what I do, because, with my NDE at 25, I wanted to come back and raise my little boys because they were too young to lose their mother. And, I was told it was my time. The answer was no, and then when I come back and then, I'm just so have gratitude that my boys didn't have to have that, didn't have to grow up without their mother. So it's something people take for granted, they got to raise their kids.
Many researchers, many NDEers, people who have NDE, come back with a sense that they have a purpose or a mission to fulfill, but they don't know what it is. In your case, perhaps in part at least, it's to be mother to your children. Another part is this very TV show we're on together. Okay? Yeah. You're doing something very active. You have many guests, I'm sure, with NDEs and ADCs and XYZs. I don't know, but I'm sure you do. And you're getting the word out. And this is touching thousands of people. You don't realize how many. And because people talk about it to other people, and then they buy a book and that opens them up. And then they read another book and they will see another show. I mean, there are piles of interviews on YouTube of NDEers. I have a dozen videos in my presentations on YouTube. I mean, it's filled with spiritual stuff.
Yeah. And you never know who needs it the most is who's going to see it when they need it. I see in the comments all the time, I needed this so bad today. Or one interview that I wasn't sure anybody was really going to watch much, but for one person, it's like, this is the best one yet.
Yeah.
And maybe not a lot of people watched it, but for that person, it meant a lot. And there's something in that message they needed to hear. Whether it's with yours or, the next person's or whoever. I mean, there's a lot of people out there that's going to need it.
I don't know. I've often wondered about this. If people at some previous point in our evolution just knew about life after death. But everything I've heard about really, because I grew up in a Judaic Christian country, they refer to the Old Testament and the New Testament. And the God of the Bible was quite different than the God of NDEers. Not just about love, but many people fear God and the hellfire and brimstone ministers and preachers and all the rest. And I'm wondering if mankind at a much earlier time knew that life continues, because it would be so much different if we all not just believed it. You see, I've gotten to a point where people say, do you believe we continue? Do you believe in life after death? And I say, no, I don't believe it. I know it.
Right.
That's what's happened in my evolution since 1974 to now. All, not just this book, but many things that have happened. And they might not be proof of anything for somebody else, but they are for me.
Right. And even war, you think you're killing the other side, you're putting them in paradise. If they all really knew exactly what they were doing.
Yeah, I've read so many books about near-death experiences and books about ADCs, but there weren't that many about it. Most are about signs. Ours is the only book that covers all the different types. Oh, I mentioned there are two other kinds.
Okay.
One is where people find there's a message on their cell phone. They sometimes get a message from a deceased loved one, or well, it used to be the old telephone answering machines. Which had cassette tapes. There'd be messages on that, or some people find a message on a computer, and they know it wasn't there before, and it's in the wording and references of their loved one who has died. So there are various electronic means to have an ADC. We didn't have enough of those to form a whole chapter when we wrote our book. And then I'm sure you've heard about orbs, these small balls of colored light. Some are bigger. And some bereaved parents claim that they've seen the face of their child in the orb. And so when they see that, it gives them great comfort. And I've seen everything from a large orb, about this 18, 20 inches wide, blue, to one place. She took a photograph. I saw hundreds of orbs in the sky. I don't mean way up in the sky. I mean just around treetop level and whatnot. And I don't know what they are. I don't think people may claim what they are, but there's no way to prove it that I know of yet. But I did help one woman who was a researcher. I bought her a camera. She was able to see them moving from place to place, and even able to direct it. Come land in my suitcase, or come do this, come do that. And the orb did those things, but she never found out what it is. Is it the spirit of a human being? Is it another intelligence? I don't pretend to know, but it's fascinating. And that would be a whole category.
It seems like when these things happen, they're just usually, I think, random, and just you're not thinking about anything, and it just comes, and it makes you stand still and notice out of this business. Like, just for example, last night we were busy for hours working with the animals, and that's all we were focused on, was keeping these animals from going out of the fences as we're working on the fence, and someone was getting out, and it was all this mayhem for hours. We were getting tired trying to get it done before it got dark. And all of a sudden I look over, and time stood still, and I saw a cardinal, which cardinals are everywhere. But I just focused on this cardinal. It landed on this tree limb. And I thought instantly, there's my mother-in-law, because we associate these red birds with her all the time. And then I thought, oh, you're silly, these red birds are everywhere. Then just the moment I thought that, this white feather come blowing across right in front of my face. And I went, well, just to make sure it was me. So,
And
it's just these personal little things we have. It's like your book says, hello from heaven. It's perfect.
And we do have accounts, and again, not enough. And frankly, we thought it would be too far out to have the first book to include them. But experiences where people's dogs or cats or other pets have come back. And do you have time for a long story?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. This is about a young woman, say about age 30, who had rather a blah life. She had a job at an insurance company where she just processed forms in and out all day long. Nothing creative, just work. She didn't have a social life. She wasn't that attractive that she was not a chick magnet or a guy magnet or whatever you call it. She didn't have wild dates or anything. She didn't have much of anything going on in her life. And she wasn't depressed, but this is the way it was. But she did have one thing. She had her own horse. And the horse did something called dressage riding. That's where you just use your heels to guide the horse. You don't use the reins, and you don't use verbal commands at all. But the horse has to be very attuned to the rider, and the rider has to be attuned to the horse. My older daughter does that. And it's a very specialized horseback riding, very specialized form of riding a horse. And so that's what she did every day she could. However, the horse developed problems with its feet, its hooves. And she took it in to the veterinarian, and he did some work on it. Got better for a little while, but after that, it got worse again. And eventually she had to have the horse put down. This wiped out everything, because this was her recreation, her creativity, her exercise, her whole social life. Everything was that horse. And she just retreated into a shell of sadness and depression and deprivation and everything, because nothing else was going on. Then one night she had what she called a dream, but it was very, very vivid and much more than an ordinary dream. And she saw her horse in three-dimensional color. And her horse spoke to her, mind to mind. How dare you quit horseback? Oh, that's it. She said she's never going to ride again, by the way. How dare you quit horseback riding after all I have taught you? Mm. That transformed her. I don't mean in 24 hours, but that began to work on her. And her grief began to lift. Healing occurred. And when she was able to pay off the bills of the first horse, the veterinary bills, which were very high, she eventually did get another horse and did begin riding again. And it was all because of that deceased horse coming and speaking to her and sort of admonishing her, addressing her. Go out there and do it again.
That is literally a get back on the horse story.
Yes, yeah, yes, very true. That's a good pun.
Well, thank you so much for the information. Is there anything else you didn't get to cover or you like to talk about?
I have showed it covered several times of the book. It's it's a regular sized paperback. It's only $7.97 or something at Amazon, and I urge people to read it. And if not for you, give it to somebody else who you know who has lost somebody, and they'll appreciate it. I believe it's modern day evidence for life after death, even more strongly than NDEs, near-death experiences. With a near-death experience, by definition, the person literally died, clinically died, or came very close to it. I believe nobody actually literally fully died, but it doesn't matter what my opinion is. It came very close to it, and they had this experience of leaving their body, going through a tunnel in many cases, and all that happened to them after that. But these are far more common, far more numerous. And the people who had them, because we always ask, were you taking any drugs or drinking any alcohol when you had your experience? They said yes. I don't care how good it was, we didn't use it. So as far as we know, the people who we interviewed were truthful and were not on drugs or alcohol, and were in a normal state of health. I'm not saying they're all in perfect health, but I'm saying a normal state of health. And I think that this is the most evidential form of material of life after death. Because when you start reading this, and there's so much I couldn't cover in a TV interview, that when you read these and hear these and think about these, and I guarantee everybody who reads the book, there'll be one that you really grabs you, at least one, that it will just, it's like that. And I don't know which one, you don't know which one, but it's like that. Because all these experiences are in their words. When I said there's 353 accounts, it's their words. We tape recorded all these people, and we use their language, not ours. One person on Amazon said, I don't like the book because everybody sounds different. In other words, they thought we should be the writers. It should all sound like us writing it. Well, it isn't. It's in the words of the people we interview.
Right.
And that's what makes it authentic, I think. But
it's funny what people find to complain about.
Yeah, anyway, so but I think, because that's if we really knew that this is an interim, this is an experience we're having, a human experience, and that we will evolve from this, we'll be born, we'll have a lifetime, however long, and then our body will die, we will continue. Just that alone, I'm not going to go into the bigger ramifications. But life would be so much easier, especially if you have somebody you've lost, somebody who has died in your life. You would know they're okay, they're fine, they're in better shape than we are. And we could, because I've met some people who are so hung up, so stuck, especially if their child dies. It could be their spouse or their lover or whatever. I'm not limiting just bereaved parents, but anybody. And they're just so crestfallen for years. They just stopped living. And they just knew that this is a train station. You come here for a while and you leave and they go on. Something like that.
Makes me think of that song, I Can Only Imagine, where, there he says he can only imagine, what it's like for his dad that has passed, what he sees, and then how he can only imagine what it'll be like when he's there, when he sees Jesus for the first time, and all those things. So, and it touched, it crossed all across all kinds of music, like everybody loved it.
Yes.
And then they made a movie of it. And people are familiar with that. It come from, he was abused by his dad, and his dad was a very mean man. And he ended up finding unconditional love, forgiveness, whatever his dad became a Christian before he died. It was a really good story, but not all in real life does it end that way, where someone comes to see the light.
Very, very popular Christian book is Heaven is for Real by Todd Burpo, which was made into a movie. And that was about his little young son who had a near-death experience and knew that he, I believe, had a sister who had died, but nobody had ever told him. He claimed he saw his grandfather, stuff like that. That's a very beautiful movie, and I recommend the title. Heaven is for Real. I'm sure you can buy it on Amazon or rent it on Netflix. Not rent it, but see it on Netflix or any place else.
I listened to a recent interview of Colton Burpo recently, and it's interesting to hear him as a young man now recount his story.
That's what we're talking about. It's Colton. Yeah. It was written by his father, but
Right.
But that movie somehow it really touched me. I saw it twice, and it really moved me the way they did it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't super.
I've seen it a lot. I watch the NDE movies over and over and over.
Yeah. Oh, me too. Yeah. My favorite is Resurrection with Ellen Bernstein. If you've ever seen that.
Is that the one where she buys her boyfriend a new car and they have a car wreck?
Yeah. Yeah. That's at the beginning. The car. I don't know if he buys it, but it starts off with a car. I think a sports car is wrecked.
Yeah, that movie was before its time, wasn't it? I mean, because that's an old movie.
Yeah. Yeah. It was way ahead of its time. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Peggy.
All right. Bye-bye.
Goodbye to you, and thank you very much for having me as a guest.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye now.